they need for their future careers. You know, for medical students, that would be suturing, CPR, wound care, and other things. And in 3 years, we had more than 2,000 participants from 27 countries. So it's quite international. And overall, we had 6 Nobel laureates join us at our conferences. And we, huh? No, nothing. Okay. Yeah. And we had those 6 Nobel laureates. It was a great honor having them. And we're continuing to organize these conferences in 2022. And while I was studying, I got into sleep by actually attending a neuroscience course which is just a mandatory neuroscience course. But that neuroscience course focused for medical students on sleep, suturing, CPR, wound care, and other things. And in 3 years, we had more than 2,000 participants from 27 countries. Maybe somebody can just mute themselves. Nobel laureates join us at our conferences. And we, huh? Maybe somebody can mute themselves because I hear myself twice.
Yeah, wait. Maybe.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. YouTube
Perfect.
was live in. Yeah.
Oh,
sorry.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thanks. Yeah, so I got into neuroscience. It's totally fine. I got into neuroscience by attending this neuroscience course, and the course focused mainly in the field of neuroscience. It focused strongly on sleep medicine, and so I attended the course and learned about sleep medicine. I was fascinated by how much is still unknown about sleep. You know, most people in an ideal world should spend around a third of their lives sleeping. You know, 8 hours per day in an ideal world. I have to emphasize that. And yet we know so little about sleep. We basically don't know the main purpose, the main sole purpose. Why do we actually sleep 8 hours and not 2 hours and not 15 hours? Because if you look at the animal kingdom, you see animals sleeping, you know, from 2 hours per day to 20 hours per day. So we basically don't know yet why we sleep 7, 8, or 9 hours per day. And that fascinated me so much that I basically volunteered and worked in the sleep clinic for 4 to 5 years, seeing patients who have various sleep problems, including sleep apnea, insomnia, restless leg syndrome, and all the other disorders. And I worked there for 4 to 5 years, and I actually wrote a book about sleep medicine for the public. It's called Introduction to Sleep Medicine. If anybody's interested, you can just contact me. I can send you a copy of it. It focuses on the physiological and pathophysiological aspects of sleep, but written in a very plain, simple language so many people can easily understand. You don't have to be a sleep expert or a neuroscience expert to understand it. And I also cover loads of sleep disorders in that book too. And that kind of led me to basically Harvard Medical School, to the Department of Neurobiology, where I'm studying sleep currently. So my primary focus in sleep is trying to find the molecular mechanisms of why poor sleep quality is so bad for your health. And I'm doing that in animal models. So you can see my cute little mice here. I love them, and they are, you know, I call them my lab heroes, because without them, it would be so much more difficult. And now we're going to go into the basics of sleep. What is sleep and why we need it? So the definition of sleep is not really easy to make, but this is, you know, one of the definitions that are, I would say, more precise than not. So it's a state of altered consciousness. We all know that, which is characterized by the inhibition, I would say relative actually, inhibition of all sensory activity, meaning that we don't really hear what people are saying. We don't really feel what people are doing around us while we're asleep. That's the sensory disconnect. And also we have a disconnect in terms of voluntary muscles. So most of the muscles in our body are inhibited, apart from muscles that control the movement of the eyes, and apart from obviously the muscles that control your heart rate, and the muscles that control your breathing, because you need to breathe during sleep. In an ideal world, for adults, the optimal time per night is between 7 to 9 hours of sleep. And I underline per night because in sleep terms, it's not the same. You know, somebody asked me a great question a long time ago. Is it the same if I sleep 4 hours per day and 4 hours per night? And that's 8 hours overall, you know, per day. But that's not basically great, because 4 plus 4 is not really equal to 8 in sleep terms. So humans are, even though in periods hundreds of years ago, humans actually slept 2 times per day at 2 different periods. Nowadays, and I think many researchers would agree that sleep is a night activity and not really a daily activity. So I would emphasize per night, and also would emphasize in continuity 7 to 9 hours. It's not great if you sleep 2 hours and then wake up, and then 2 hours and then wake up. So 7 to 9 hours in continuity. I'm going to explain why later on. And many people thought not really a long time ago, but relatively recent history, that sleep is some sort of passive state. Because you go to sleep and you kind of, they would say, waste time. You waste 8 hours doing nothing. But far from it. In sleep, actually, some parts of the brain I'm going to show you on the next slide are actually more active than when you're awake, and especially during this a period of this phase of sleep called REM sleep. I'm going to explain what REM sleep is and these certain brain areas, why it's important that they're more active during sleep. So this is an image of a of a rat's brain. So this is the brain of a rat in 3 different states. So I'm not an expert in French, so I'm not even going to try to pronounce this. Maybe some of you are. But I'm going to explain. So basically what we see here is the rat's brain, and all the different colors, blue, green, or red, or yellow, represent different amounts of blood flow going to that part of the brain. So the more red, yellow, orange the part is, the more blood flow it is going to that area. Why is that important? Because if your neuronal cells are doing something, meaning are being more active, they very logically need more oxygen and nutrition. And all that oxygen, nutritious molecules are delivered with the blood to them, basically. So the more blood means indirectly more neuronal activity. There are some quirks here. It's not really more blood equals to more neuronal activity, but relatively speaking, it's more or less okay. And we see here 3 different states. The left picture represents a mouse while he's awake. The middle picture while he's in non-REM sleep, which we can think of as either light or deep sleep. We're going to talk about it a bit more about it later. And the right picture represents a mouse in what's called a REM sleep, or rapid eye movement sleep. That's the phase of sleep that's most associated with dreams. And you can see here clearly in this picture that in this REM phase of sleep, you can see much more red, orange, and yellow areas compared to when the mouse is awake. So this is the brain section of the same brain region and all that stuff. So it's very, very similar in terms of brain regions, but you can see the brain is much more active during sleep, which is kind of paradoxical, than during wake. And I'm specifically talking about REM sleep phase here. And you can also see that in deep or light sleep, in non-REM sleep phases, that the brain is slightly less active than when awake. But when you go to REM sleep stage, the brain all of a sudden becomes much, much more active, which is very, very interesting. I think many people don't actually know that some parts of your brain are actually more active during sleep than when awake. And speaking of these sleep stages, so sleep is divided generally into non-REM and REM sleep stages. REM is, I'm going to repeat it, REM is an acronym for rapid eye movement. And it's called rapid eye movement because in that sleep phase, your eyes move rapidly left, right, up, down, and everywhere. That's why it's called rapid eye movement. So in healthy people who don't have sleep problems, when you go to sleep, you usually go to stage 1. After you fall asleep, you usually go to stage 1 sleep, which is called also light sleep. And it's the shortest sleep stage looking overall during the night in healthy people. And you can very easily be woken up in that sleep stage. In stage 2, after that, you go to stage 2, which is somewhat in a middle ground between light and deep sleep, more deep than light, but somewhat of a middle maybe ground. And it's the longest sleep stage, and you can easily recognize it in a sleep laboratory by specific EEG features. So EEG, as we can see in this person here, is also an acronym for electroencephalography. Electro meaning something electric. Encephalo in I think Greek is brain, and graph is to write, meaning overall to write brain activity. So we use EEG electrodes, which we put on the skull of people to record brain activity. And while recording brain activity, we can decipher if the person is in stage 1, stage 2, or REM, or some other stage of sleep. And I just highlighted these specific features for stage 2 of sleep. One of these features, which is very characteristic on the EEG, so this is a typical EEG recording of stage 2, is called a K complex. And this burst of activity here that we can see, also specific for stage 2, is called a sleep spindle. And after we go through stage 2, we go to stage 3 of sleep, which is also called deep or slow wave sleep, because on EEG, we can see very big and slow waves of sleep. That stage is very, very, very important for memory consolidation, and it's also important for feeling rested during the next day. So many people who have sleep disorders, because they wake up relatively frequently, consciously or unconsciously, wake up, they don't get to stage 3. They get to stage 2 and then wake up, and then they go to stage 1 again, 2, and then wake up, and then 1, 2. They don't get to stage 3, and then they feel tired during the next day, lack of concentration, memory problems, and so on and so on. And after deep sleep, we go into this very specific, very unusual sleep stage, which is called rapid eye movement sleep, where your eyes rapidly move left, right, up, and down. And it's called paradoxical sleep because while we're going through the stages 1, 2, and 3, your breathing becomes more regular, your heart rate becomes slower, everything kind of slows down. Whereas when you come into REM sleep, everything all of a sudden wakes up. Your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up, your eyes start moving. It says, and on EEG, you can see waves on EEG which are very similar to being awake. And because of all those features, and because this sleep stage looks like wake, it's actually called paradoxical sleep. And it's also a stage where we associate dreams with. So many dreams, especially bizarre ones and very weird ones, happen. It's in REM sleep. But dreams also happen in other sleep stages, but these dreams in other sleep stages are more kind of normal, meaning you dream of a friend that you met yesterday, whereas in REM, you would dream like you were on Mars with some aliens or something like that. So very weird and bizarre dreams. And I'm just going to show you here, when you go to a sleep clinic and you do an overnight study, what your sleep actually looks like. So you have different electrodes here. The first 4 electrodes represent the EEG, the brain's activity. So you can see various waves that represent your brain activity. These 2, LEOG and right EOG, meaning left electrooculogram, the oculogram that monitors the activity of your left eye, and the right oculogram of your right eye, you can see here that the eyes move, and then nothing's happening, nothing much, and then move again, and then again, and again, and again. So these deep or shallow waves represent movement of the eyes. And when you see that, coupled with this sort of EEG, you can determine that this person is in REM sleep stage because the eyes are rapidly moving. Also, one other thing that we need to note during sleep is what's called EMG, electromyography, meaning the tone of your muscles. When you go to sleep, you relax, and when you go deeper into sleep, your muscles relax even more and more, meaning your muscle tone goes down. And REM sleep is characterized by almost complete muscle atonia, meaning your muscles have basically minimum or no tone whatsoever. You're completely relaxed, but your eyes are moving rapidly, which is kind of weird. So that's how a typical EEG plus EMG of REM sleep would look like in a sleep clinic. And now, but how does this all start? How does sleep even start? I mean, it's a very, there is no simple answer, but the simplest sentence I can make right now is sleep is a delicate balance of various neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters are small molecules by which your neurons in the brain or outside the brain, because obviously we have neurons outside the brain too, communicate. So when neurons want to send a message, to another neuron, for example, to move your muscle, that message goes through neurotransmitters. They release neurotransmitters to communicate with other neurons. And there are loads of different neurotransmitters, including adenosine, acetylcholine, serotonin, dopamine, and all the others that you've probably heard of. But for sleep, it's that delicate balance of neurotransmitters that's extremely important to initiate sleep. I'm only going to focus on a few here to make it more simple. So one of the most important molecules in our body is called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. It's also called the energy molecule. Why? Because when your cells need energy, when you need to move, when you need to think, when you need to do any activity, your cells use this ATP, this energy molecule, as a sort of fuel to execute the activity you want to do. And by using that ATP molecule, they take one of the phosphates, because it's adenosine triphosphate, has three phosphates. Excuse me, it has three phosphates. It takes one or two phosphates and converts this ATP triphosphate to adenosine diphosphate, meaning two phosphates, or adenosine monophosphate, meaning one phosphate. The key thing is, while the cell is doing this, it also releases, because of this conversion from ATP to ADP or AMP, it releases adenosine, a key neurotransmitter or molecule for sleep. Why? Because when you do loads of stuff during the day, you get a buildup of adenosine, because when you wake up till the night, you do loads of stuff, either cognitive or motor stuff, and adenosine builds up. And when adenosine is building up, it inhibits a key wake molecule, wake neurotransmitter, which is called acetylcholine, and inhibits acetylcholine by binding to its receptors. And therefore, acetylcholine, there is less acetylcholine, meaning there is less wake promoting acetylcholine, meaning you're going to feel sleepier and sleepier. Along with that, the buildup of adenosine also inhibits neurons in the brain, which are very important in disorders, for example, such as narcolepsy, which are called hypocretin or orexin neurons, the same group of neurons in the brain, which are very important for keeping you awake. And when adenosine inhibits them, you also feel sleepier and sleepier. And the third thing that I'm going to mention here, which is very important for making you feel even sleepier, is adenosine acts on a group of neurons in the brain's hypothalamus, which is a brain region I'm going to show you in the next slide, in a specific region. I don't know if this is really important or not. It's called VLPO, like a nucleus, like a cluster of neurons. It's called ventrolateral preoptic nucleus. That doesn't really matter right now, but it acts on the hypothalamus to release GABA. And GABA is an extremely important inhibitory molecule in the nervous system. And when it inhibits in the brain, for example, here, and when it inhibits, when the hypothalamus secretes GABA, that important inhibitory molecule, it inhibits the arousal system, which is located, I'm going to show you here. One of the more important parts of the arousal system is located here in the brain, in an area which is called the brainstem. So it's basically very, very near the brain, as you can see here. And while we're awake, it actually promotes the brain to stay awake, right? And when GABA inhibits it, there's a significant lack of wake promotion, and thus we feel sleepier and sleepier. So all of this, what I mentioned, plus a number of other neurotransmitters control the sleep and wake cycle. So the key message here is, while we go through the day, there's a buildup of adenosine because we use energy from ATP, and that adenosine then creates this cascade that makes us feel sleepier and sleepier. And here I just highlighted a brain section. So this is the brain cortex, the brain stem, the cerebellum. Here, I just highlighted in all of these colors some important regions for sleep. So an important region for sleep here, it's called basal forebrain, and that's where the acetylcholine release is located, right? That we mentioned that acetylcholine is important wake promoting molecule. So less acetylcholine, less wake, meaning more sleep. Another important region is this green one here. It's called the hypothalamus, and we're going to talk about it later on. And that is important because in the hypothalamus, there's a cluster of neurons, which is called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, SCN. And that suprachiasmatic nucleus is probably the most important regulator of the sleep and wake cycle. So when the suprachiasmatic nucleus says it's time to sleep, it primes the brain and the whole body to basically go to sleep, to prepare for sleep. Another important area in the nervous system for wake and sleep is this area here in the brainstem that we mentioned, and it's called the reticular formation. And that's important for keeping you awake. When there's an inhibition of the reticular formation, you feel sleepier and sleepier, such as the inhibition that we talked about done by GABA, the inhibitory molecule. And probably the most famous out of all of these is the pineal gland, a small structure in the brain that secretes melatonin. And I think many people take melatonin, during the night to feel to sleep better, and so on and so on. So this is the region of the brain that secretes melatonin, the sleep promoting molecule. And now we're going to go to this slide and talk about the circadian rhythm. So the circadian rhythm is extremely important for keeping you awake and putting you to sleep. And it's an endogenous cyclic rhythm that lasts around 24 hours. And during the night, it says go to sleep. During the day, it says stay awake. But how does it know when it's actually day outside or when it's night outside? So the most important cue, the most important factor for the circadian rhythm to determine if it's night or day is light. I didn't write sunlight here because any light from your laptop, from your phone, from the lights in the interior of your home, any light can tell it it's day outside. So you can see already here how easily you can fool your circadian rhythm into thinking it's day outside, whereas it's actually night, but you're constantly looking at a computer and your body thinks it's actually day, meaning it primes all the functions in the body for day functions and not for night functions, because you have different functions. Different parts of the body have different functions during the day and during the night. So you can see here that it's not really great if you use your laptop constantly during the night and just before you go to bed, or maybe look at your phone, because you can fool your circadian rhythm into thinking it's day. But how was this actually discovered? It's a very simple, very fun story. So there was this guy, I think like 350, maybe 400, I think even 400 years ago, and he did a very simple experiment. He put a plant, I forgot the name of the plant, but some name of the plant. He put it right next to the window, and he observed that the plant would open its leaves during the day and close its leaves during the night. And then he thought, well, this is really interesting. How does the plant know if it's day outside or night? So he decided to put the plant just below the window in a small cupboard, dark cupboard without any light inside. And he still observed the plant opening its leaves during the day without actually seeing the light and closing the leaves during the night. And he concluded that there must be some endogenous rhythm inside the plant that tells the plant to wake up or to go to sleep. And later on in 2017, actually there was the Nobel Prize was awarded to scientists from the US for discovering the molecular mechanisms of this circadian rhythm that was noticed almost 400 years ago. So that was a nice, fun little story. And the master clock, the master regulator of this circadian rhythm is located in the hypothalamus, which I'm going to show again, just briefly. So this is located here in the deep in the brain, the hypothalamus, the most important region for sleep, although not obviously the only one important, but the most important one, where the master clock that controls your sleep and wake cycle is located. And it's located in that nucleus that I mentioned, the suprachiasmatic SCN, suprachiasmatic nucleus. So this is a very simple schematic of how we actually go to sleep or keep or actually be awake. So when there is a lot, we're just going to follow the numbers 1 to 9. So when there is light outside, I'm going to emphasize one more time, light from the computer or light from the sun, any light. When there is light outside, the light excites a certain number of cells in the retina of your eye, which then sends a signal to the suprachiasmatic nucleus, the master regulator of the circadian clock. And then it basically tells the suprachiasmatic nucleus if it's day or night outside. And if it's night outside, meaning there is no light coming from the outside, no signal coming, or very little signal coming from these cells in the retina, the SCN concludes, okay, it's night, we need to prime the body for all the night functions. Then it actually excites another nucleus in the hypothalamus, it doesn't matter the name, which, and this is maybe not known, actually that it sends a signal not into the brain, but rather into the spinal cord, more specifically the thoracic spinal cord. So basically your thoracic spinal cord is also very important for sleep. And the signal from that spinal cord, from the thoracic spinal cord, goes to a cluster of neuronal cells, which is called let's say in your neck, which is called the superior cervical ganglion. And then the superior cervical ganglion sends a signal to the pineal gland to release melatonin to make you feel sleepy. So you can obviously see here that people who had various accidents, like car accidents or other very harsh accidents, and had their thoracic spinal cord or cervical spinal cord cut, damaged, or in any other way injured, they can have trouble sleeping because this signal going down or up may not be as good as it should be. So melatonin is not going to be released in sufficient concentrations, and then they will have trouble sleeping. So those people actually can take melatonin via tablets, via pills. So this is a very simple schematic of how we actually go to sleep. And now, I think that the main question for the whole webinar is, why is sleep important? So we learned we learned how do we go to sleep, how do we maintain sleep, all the neurotransmitters, but why is sleep actually important? Why do we sleep 8 hours or 7 or 9, or some of us 5 hours per night? Well, sleep is important in so many functions. I think memory is the first one that comes to mind. So people who don't get enough of deep sleep, or who sleep short periods of time, 4 hours, 5 hours per night, chronically, they can have serious memory issues. Also, speaking of memory issues, it has been found that chronic poor sleep quality can actually increase the risk of dementia. And one of the main symptoms of dementia is lack of memory. Basically, people can't remember stuff or have difficulty remembering or recalling memories. Secondly, it's not just about brain memory. It's also about immune memory, immunological memory. So the sleep is extremely important for the immune system, because the immune system can actually, with good proper sleep, it can help the immune system remember certain antigens, let's say in a simple word, certain pathogens, certain parts of pathogens, so it can react better the next time you get infected with certain pathogens. There's also this fun study that showed that people who slept poorly have a higher risk of catching the normal common cold, probably because of some immune interference with sleep, poor sleep quality. Next, and I think this is also very important, Poor sleep quality can lead to poor concentration and poor productivity during the day, and various mood shifts. So people can, have very, very big mood swings. In the morning they're happy, and then 3 hours later they're sad, and then they're anxious because of poor sleep. And one of the factors, obviously not the only factor, but one of the factors in the horrible Chernobyl disaster, the nuclear power plant disaster in Ukraine, was actually poor sleep quality. Why? Because the people who worked at that plant were actually shift workers. They worked during the night and then slept during the day, which is obviously not great. And then because of the lack of concentration and all the rest, one of the factors was actually poor sleep was one of the factors in the Chernobyl disaster. And can you actually believe this? That more than 100,000 traffic accidents per year happen because of poor sleep. People falling asleep on behind the steering wheel, or lack of concentration, or prolonged time to respond to situations on the road. And this is especially important for bus drivers, drivers of some extremely dangerous goods, because it's obviously not great if a bus driver did not sleep well, because it can endanger the life of other people in the bus too. Also, there's a huge economic cost to poor sleep quality. And it's estimated in the US that $150 billion, which is a lot of money, is actually wasted because of sleep-related fatigue costs. Because poor sleep equals to poor productivity, and also for leaders, for people who run businesses, poor sleep leads to poor leadership abilities too. Next, sleep and stress. So we know that sleep, that stress, acute stress or chronic stress can impact sleep negatively. I think we've all been kind of patients of that unfortunate acute stress or chronic stress at work or in the family. And there was this survey from the National Sleep Foundation that more than 40% of adults, meaning almost half of adults, reported lying awake at night due to stress at least once in the past month, which is very, very bad. Especially that happens every week for years and years because of stress at work, too much workload, and so on and so on. And while we're experiencing stress, acute stress, or even worse, chronic stress, there can be a dysregulation of one part of the nervous system called the autonomous nervous system, because of the secretion of adrenaline, a stress, apart from among others, a stress molecule, cortisol, a chronic stress molecule. We can get an increase of heart rate, of blood pressure. I didn't write here, I think, but we can also increase the risk of diabetes, of stroke, of cardiovascular disorders, and all that stuff by stress alone. And by increasing stress daily, you reduce the quality of sleep, which in turn leads to more stress, right? So the more stress, you have this vicious cycle: more stress, less sleep, and even more stress, which obviously, chronically speaking, is very, very, very bad. And you have a higher chance of all these all these disorders. There's this study here also from the American Psychological Association. So the light blue represents the percentage of people. I think the sample size is 1,400 people, almost 1,400 people. Excuse me. So the light blue represents the percentage of people who sleep fewer than 8 hours a night. And the dark blue represents people who get at least 8 hours per night. So you can see the percentage of people who sleep poorly are also more irritable, angry, overwhelmed, lacking in motivation, and all these other cognitive issues. So stress is an extremely important parameter when it comes to sleep quality. There are certain ways to try to reduce stress, and I know it's easier said than done. Try to lower your caffeine and alcohol intake, healthier diet, exercise, and I think the one that I love most is leave work at work. I know it's not easy, and it's easier said than done, but try not to respond to emails at midnight, stressful emails right before midnight, before you're going to bed. This is just a suggestion. And of course, there are also other ways to try to reduce stress. For more, speaking of other disorders, poor sleep quality can increase the risk of cancer, specifically colorectal cancer and breast cancer. It's not highlighted here. Those are the two types of cancer that are almost continuously associated with poor sleep quality. And I just want to highlight, when I say poor sleep quality, I don't mean sleeping poorly one night. I mean sleeping poorly for years. And unfortunately, many people do sleep poorly for years. There's also a very big increase in the risk of heart disorders, and hypertension, and especially diabetes. And I don't even need to mention that these disorders, diabetes, hypertension, heart disorders, can increase the risk of other disorders, heart attack, stroke, kidney disorders, and all the others by even more. So sleep can unfortunately be the start of this vicious domino, I would say, effect. Regarding car crashes, in the US, there are 6,000 fatal car crashes yearly because of drowsy driving. People fall asleep behind the wheel. And this is a horrible statistic that 1 in 25 people fell asleep behind the wheel in the past month. And you can just imagine what this would mean if you looked at years and years and years of statistics. Also, one important thing for poor sleep is that it can actually increase the weight. How? Because it was found that poor sleep quality actually increases the levels of the hunger hormone, which is called ghrelin, and decreases the levels of the appetite control hormone, leptin. So this is also very, very bad. And it was noticed, very interestingly, that people who sleep poorly don't actually crave for healthy food, apples, oranges, and bananas. They crave for very unhealthy, sweet, salty foods, hamburgers, donuts, pizza, cakes, and all that stuff, which is also very interesting. And you can also see how this can increase the weight of people who sleep poorly for years or months, for that matter. Regarding neurological conditions and psychiatric conditions, I mentioned dementia earlier, and this includes Alzheimer's dementia and also psychiatric disorders such as depression, anxiety, and the rest. And I can also mention here that people who have depression, a lot of them actually sleep poorly. It's not only that sleep can increase the risk of depression. Depression itself can increase the risk of poor sleep, but that's partly due to the neurobiology of depression, but also partly due to the medications that people take for depression and other psychiatric disorders, because those medications can disrupt the balance of neurotransmitters such as serotonin or dopamine, which are important for sleep. And you can see how this can actually lead to poor sleep quality. I'm going to skip this slide briefly because I explained it earlier. I'm just going to note one sleep disorder specifically, which is extremely prevalent. A third of adults, at least, has sleep apnea, diagnosed or undiagnosed. So many people have undiagnosed sleep apnea. So sleep apnea is a condition where people stop breathing during the night for 10, 20, 30 seconds. And that happens multiple times per night, 50, 100, 150 times per night. Why does that happen? Why do people actually stop breathing? So when you lay, this is a schematic here of a person. So when you lay on your back, this is the tongue, okay? This is the nasal cavity. And this is where the airflow should go in people who don't have sleep apnea. So when you go to bed and lie on your back, we learned that when you go deeper into sleep, your muscle tone gets lower and lower, meaning your muscles, including your tongue, relax more and more. And in people because of unknown reasons, still in most people for unknown reasons, that muscle tone becomes way too low. And then the tongue, which is a muscle, falls backwards when you're sleeping on your back and covers this X here, covers the airway. So when you're breathing through your mouth, the air can't go through. When you're breathing through your nose, the air can't go through, and you actually stop breathing for 10, 15, 20 or more seconds. And unfortunately, that can increase the risk of all sorts of disorders that we mentioned above: hypertension, diabetes, cardiovascular, stroke, and all the rest. how does it actually increase all that? By you not breathing during those 10, 15, 20 or more seconds, your body fights for air, which is completely normal because your body needs oxygen, fights for air. And while it fights for air, the level of one part of the nervous system called the sympathetic nervous system, which we can also describe as a sort of stress part of the nervous system, the activity increases and your heart rate increases, your blood pressure increases. And when that happens multiple times per night, months and months and years, you can see that that part of the nervous system can get dysregulated, and you can easily increase the risk of hypertension, diabetes, and other disorders. The solution for all of this is very simple. Unfortunately, the cure is not, for most people, there is no cure because we don't know the cause of this overly low muscle tone, unfortunately. For some people, you can do surgery around the neck area, mostly in people who have some sort of anatomical deformations or in people who are overly obese, because overly obese people, if people are overly obese, you can see that if there is more fat around the neck, it can compress the airway and thus block the airway even more. The solution is relatively simple. It's called a CPAP machine, a continuous positive airway pressure machine. It's basically an inverted vacuum cleaner. So a vacuum cleaner sucks air in, and this machine, which you only wear during the night, pumps air directly in your nose or mouth, depending on your mask. So you put this mask on, you press this very simple button, you go to sleep, and it continuously pumps air in your nose or mouth and basically stops this event of the tongue falling back. Basically stops it almost completely. So people who have severe apnea, after using all of this, have basically no apnea, almost no apnea at all. And of course, that helps long-term in reducing the risk of all of these disorders. And regarding just a few fun sleep stories, coffee, I think most of us, I don't actually drink a lot. I drink very few cups of coffee, maybe like once every 3 weeks, or maybe a month. I don't basically drink coffee, but most people drink coffee, and the caffeine, the molecule in the coffee, acts by blocking adenosine, which remember as the sleep, let's say, molecule. It's relative, but let's say the sleep molecule. It blocks adenosine from binding to its receptor in the brain. And by not binding to its receptor, adenosine cannot act on sleep. And thus, basically, caffeine delays the sleep onset. And when caffeine, it depends on the person, after 2 hours to 6 hours, when it drops off, adenosine, when the levels drop off, adenosine can bind to its receptor and then make us feel sleepy. I know that some people don't feel awake after drinking coffee because it somehow doesn't affect them. That can be true because there was this study that showed that genetic mutations in the adenosine receptor can actually make people resistant to the effects of caffeine. So maybe you have some sort of genetic mutation if caffeine doesn't act on you. Beauty sleep, I think we all heard of the term beauty sleep. Sleeping, 7, 8, 9 hours per day and then feeling refreshed and with a beautiful face the next morning. There was this one Swedish study that's actually fun and showed beauty sleep actually exists. So they gathered a group of men who slept normally for a day or two, and then the other group of men slept poorly or didn't sleep at all. I think they were almost completely or completely sleep deprived of sleep. And then they took pictures of the faces of those people and showed it to women and told the women only to choose the most attractive men in those pictures. And the women actually chose the men who slept more. So I guess we need to sleep more to actually look better. Eye bags are also, I think, one of the, so the discoloration of the skin below your eyes. It's, I think, the most common symptom of poor sleep quality, and it happens because of the dilatation of the capillaries, the small blood vessels beneath the skin of your eyes. And because the skin is very thin below your eyes, the color of the blood, which is bluish, purplish, that sort of color, goes through the skin, and then you see those purplish eye bags below your eyes. And I think one of the most fun parts of well, it's not really fun for people who have them, but one of the most interesting parts of sleep disorders are parasomnias. So parasomnias are all the very weird activities people do during sleep, and they're not conscious of them. One of the most famous is sleepwalking. So sleepwalking is a parasomnia when people just walk around during sleep and they're not aware of it. And when they wake up the next morning, they're completely not aware what happened the last night. But there are also many more weird disorders, such as when people are pretending to fight during sleep. So that's aggression during sleep. We had one patient, I remember him, because we have a camera in the room where we do the sleep studies. There was this patient that was asleep. He went out of bed completely unconsciously, and he basically destroyed the whole room and the whole sleep equipment completely unconsciously, which was interesting to watch for sure, but it wasn't really interesting for all the costs that we had to pay. But it was interesting. And all sorts of other disorder, all sorts of other weird activities people do during sleep. And yawning is a very, very prevalent also symptom, I would say, of people who need sleep. And we basically don't know why yawning occurs. One of the most prevalent theories for now is yawning occurs because of the increase in temperature within your skull. So it's called intracranial temperature, increase of temperature in your skull. But what has yawning got to do with increase in temperature in your skull? So basically, when you yawn, when you see other people yawning, we can also talk why we yawn when we see other people yawning, or why we laugh or why we cry when we see other people. That's also an interesting topic. But let's get back to yawning. So when we yawn, we slightly increase our heart rate. And then by increasing our heart rate, the blood is pumping more quickly. Obviously, the heart is pumping the blood more quickly. And so the blood from the heart can be delivered more quickly. The colder blood can be delivered more quickly to the brain, to the cranium, to the skull, and get rid of that warmer blood, and thus reduce the temperature in the skull. So that's one of the theories. It's not really proven. One of the theories why we yawn, basically. And just a few more slides, and I think we're done. I think we are hopefully on time. My research in sleep here at Harvard Medical School. So I basically I'm basically trying to find out the molecular effects of poor sleep quality. Why poor sleep quality causes all sorts of various health issues that we talked about earlier. We want to understand what the vital function of sleep is, because I told you at the beginning, we don't know. We have theories why sleep is important. We know sleep is important for memory, for other things, but we don't know what the vital and key function of sleep actually is, especially since we sleep a third, we should sleep a third of the day, which is a huge part of the day. And I'm going to show you just a few pictures of the research that we did. So this work is done by my colleagues in the lab. So I work primarily with mice, with rodents. Other people in the laboratory work with fruit flies. So these like very small, like a centimeter big or even smaller actually, flies. And some people will think, so what's the use of these fruit flies? I mean, they're small, they're so far away from humans. I mean, what can you do with them? But they're extremely valuable in all sorts of studies, and so many Nobel laureates won their prizes because of the work on fruit flies. For example, the 2017 Nobel Prize was actually won because they discovered the molecular mechanisms of the circadian rhythm in fruit flies, later also proven in mice and so on, but primarily discovered in fruit flies. So these tiny, tiny animals can help us a lot. So what did we do here? So we deprive fruit flies of sleep. So fruit flies sleep just like humans, not really. So they sleep also during the day and during the night, but they're also awake during the day. So it's relatively similar to humans. And we deprive the fruit flies of sleep to see the levels of a very harmful state called oxidative stress, which is a state that can kill cells in organs where it happens, and which is a state of buildup of oxidative radicals, which are very toxic if they stay in the tissue for long. So it's normal that oxidative radicals are created in tissues by cells, but it's also normal that they're flushed away. And if they're kept there, it causes a state of oxidative stress. And it can kill cells and cause huge, huge damage. And oxidative stress is connected to all sorts of cardiovascular disorders, cancer, and all sorts of other disorders. So we can see here the green line and the blue line are flies that are deprived of sleep. And the gray lines are flies that sleep normally. And we can see here various organs, such as the brain and other organs of fruit flies, including the intestines of fruit flies. And you can see, which is very, very interesting, this has been published last year in 2020, actually 2 years ago, that oxidative stress levels are extremely high in fruit flies who are sleep deprived, but only in the intestines, not in the brain or other organs, which is very weird because you wouldn't connect the small intestine, large intestine to sleep primarily, right? You would connect the brain to sleep, the nervous system, but not the intestines. But you can see here huge oxidative stress levels, and it has not been discovered before in the intestines of the fruit flies. And then we wanted to see if this same occurrence, phenomena happens in mice. So these are mice that are non-sleep deprived, meaning sleep normally, sleep deprived for 1 day, for 2 days, and 5 days. So remember, this is not like deprivation for 5 years. This is deprivation for 2 days, right? And it's also not complete sleep deprivation. So these mice, I think, actually sleep roughly 50% of the time. So we only deprive 50% of their sleep, which happens normally in humans when they work too much or under stress or something like that. And we see various organs, small intestine, muscles, heart, and all the other organs. And you can see the main difference between non-deprived mice and 2 days of deprivation is oxidative stress levels in the small intestine, just like in the fruit fly, right? Which is very, very interesting. You can see that levels in other tissues are basically the same, basically no different. But the small intestine experiences huge levels of oxidative stress and cell death too. And I think my basically last slide here is I want to ask a question. So what? You found oxidative stress levels. What does that have to do with anything? Well, this is the slide that I hope will convince you how important it is to study this. So this is a study done in fruit flies who are sleep deprived. So red flies here in this graph are sleep deprived flies. Dark red flies are also sleep deprived flies, and gray flies are non-deprived flies, sleeping completely normal. So you can see when we deprive flies, you see they live around 10 days compared to 30, 40 days. So the sleep deprivation cuts lifespan by 3 times, which is huge. But the interesting part is when we activate, we're now looking at the dark red lines. When we activate antioxidant enzymes to clear the oxidative stress in the gut, and specifically and only in the gut, these fruit flies who are sleep deprived but with no oxidative stress live completely normally, just like fruit flies who sleep normally, meaning that oxidative stress in the gut and not the brain directly influences lifespan by 3 times. And you can see this graph here, same thing. Red is fruit flies who are sleep deprived, gray is non-deprived flies. But here we activated antioxidant enzymes, not in the gut, but in the brain, only in the brain. And you can see basically it has almost no effect by activating antioxidant enzymes in the brain, which confirms the findings that sleep deprivation causes oxidative stress in the gut of fruit flies and mice and cuts lifespan significantly. And we can restore that lifespan by just clearing the oxidative stress, by clearing the oxidative stress only in the gut, which is, I think, quite fascinating. And in the future, we aim to study this even more, study the blood-brain barrier for Parkinson's, Alzheimer's disease, and all other neurological disorders, study the gut barrier, leakiness, potentially find biomarkers of this change in the gut so we can treat it early, and so on and so on. And this is the lab team, which did phenomenal work and all of this, and currently doing a phenomenal work too. And thanks to them. And I'm always open to questions. Now you can always reach out to me on this email or LinkedIn, or subscribe to my newsletter about sleep on LinkedIn, which is called Sleepletter. Yeah. And thanks, Vesna. And I hope I was within time.
Alen, we have, can you see some questions here in the chat room when you click, or I can read to you?
Oh, yes, I can. I can. Just a second. Martina, the first question, right? Is that it? Oh, what is the science behind sleep paralysis? Do you have any advice? Yes, do you have any advice on how to deal with it? So the sleep paralysis is a very interesting phenomena. And the most likely explanation on why sleep paralysis occurs is when we wake up. So we know that when we go to sleep, the muscle tone goes lower and lower and reaches its lowest point during REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, right? We know that. And the phenomena behind sleep paralysis is when we wake up from REM sleep. And so this is the unknown thing, why it takes for the brain a minute or two to actually figure out that we woke up from REM and that we need to activate our muscles. And that period of the brain figuring out that, okay, we're awake now from REM, we need to activate our muscles because they have a very low tone. That period of the brain thinking what to do actually causes sleep paralysis. So people can see everything, they can interact with the environment, but they cannot move. Also, an interesting thing is people usually during sleep paralysis experience very weird sightings in the room. So it's very bad experience. So they see weird either demons or something like that. It's like weird sightings in the room, and that probably happens because REM is associated with all sorts of all sorts of vivid and bizarre dreams, as I said, and we're just waking up from those weird and bizarre dreams, and that kind of lag a minute or two while the brain is figuring out that we're awake is likely the cause of these weird sightings that we have while we're in sleep paralysis. So I hope I answered. Do you have any advice on how to deal with it? So sleep paralysis usually happens. There are some techniques. I'm not sure if they work or not. I'm not really an expert in that. So sleep paralysis usually occurs when you're sleeping on your side, on your back. So the advice is try to sleep on your side. That's my best advice here. Okay. Vesna, you want to say something? No?
I see. Can you see other question? There's one question. How do you define sleep quality?
But I don't see that question. No. Yeah.
Host and panelist. Wait. Now? Maybe now.
Is it? Oh, it's in the chat. Oh, I'm looking at the Q&A. Sorry. Can you read it, Vesna, one more time? Where is it? The chat.
I will ask. Yeah, don't worry.
Okay.
It is the question. Yeah. How do you define sleep quality?
Yeah. Very, very, very good question. So sleep quality, it's not only about the quantity of sleep, the number of hours, it's also about sleep architecture. So let's start off with actually sleep hygiene. So sleep hygiene are all the activities or environmental things in the room that needs to be taken care of, that needs to be put, I'm going to explain, put in an optimal state for you to assure you, I mean, not really assure you, to increase the likelihood of you having a good quality sleep. So first of all, the room has to be at optimal temperature, 25, 26, not 34 or not 15. There has to be, there needs, all the lights in the room need to be turned off. So like the room needs to be dark. The mattress firmness needs to be good. So not too firm and not too soft. The pillow firmness is also very important. And the ambience in the room, meaning noise and stuff, needs to be at a very low level, right? I think this is very logical, but it's very important to increase the likelihood of good sleep. And after you go to sleep, ideally before going to sleep, you shouldn't really be on your iPad or phone or whatever for watching a movie, because the phone's right here and the light is telling your suprachiasmatic nucleus it's day when it's not day. So not using that, obviously not taking alcohol right before sleep, not exercising right before sleep, not taking caffeine obviously before sleep. So take care of all of that, and then you go into sleep. And then the sleep architecture, meaning in what stages at what time of sleep do you go, plus the percentage of time spent in each stage. Obviously you can't know that when you're home, you need to be in a sleep laboratory. So that's very important. It's very important for you to go into stage 1, 2, 3 REM, and then usually after you finish that cycle, which lasts about which lasts about 100 minutes, so 1, 2, 3 REM, you usually go back to either stage 1 or stage 2, and then again 3 REM, 2, 3 REM. So the staging is important. The percentage of time spent in each stage is important, and then all of the stuff I mentioned before, plus sleeping 7 to 9 hours, that would be classified as quality of sleep. And hopefully all of the percentages are good, staging is good, the duration of sleep is good, and that will be called good sleep quality.
Okay. Then I have sent Alan to everyone, so you can see the questions in a chat. So one question is, if you have 2 minutes time, what is the role of pillow, side and direction, environment in sleep quality?
So for sure. Pillow. Yeah, so all of this stuff, I feel like I understand why people do it, and I just want to emphasize, it's not the wisest move to go to your store and buy the cheapest pillow, thinking it's just a pillow, like it's nothing. The ergonomics and the firmness of the pillow are extremely important, obviously not only for your neck, but for the quality of sleep, to support you when you're asleep. The quality and firmness of the mattress is also very, very important. So it's not great choosing maybe the cheapest is the best, but not choosing the poorest quality mattress. So when you're buying your new bed or pillow and stuff, really try to buy good quality, because you should sleep 7 to 9 hours per day. And it's like when you're driving it's almost like buying bad quality shoes, because you think, oh, it's only shoes, but you spend in those shoes like 10 hours per day, and you spend on that bed 7 or 8 hours per day. So that is important. The environment is also important. So what we do in the sleep clinic is try to create a very calm environment where people can relax. So relaxation and lack of stress before sleep is very, very, very important. So, doing stressful situations 30 minutes before sleep is not going to help you guarantee to sleep better. So all of that is extremely important in ensuring good sleep quality.
Good. Okay. Okay. I think more or less you answered on all of the questions. I advise when somebody has questions, they can follow you each time to Instagram or Facebook or your LinkedIn, right? So they can ask you, or they can read your newsletter. Meanwhile, and on the beginning, sorry, was one question. Can you also share what parts of brain are active? I don't understand, but yeah,
for sure.
Okay.
The person probably refers to the slide I meant. I think that one of the first slides. So it depends on a lot of factors. So I would, first of all, when we're awake, it also depends on what activity we're doing. So it's not that all of the brain is active all of the time, because that's not really efficient. When we're doing cognitive things, the part of the brain that's more related to cognitive stuff is active, whereas other parts are not active. So obviously, while you're asleep, you would expect the motor parts of the brain are not really active, because we don't really need to move that much, and so on. But the part of the brain that's called the limbic system, which is important in memory processing, memory consolidation, emotional processing of emotions and stuff, is very active. Why? Because sleep is very important for memory consolidation and transfer of memory, of short-term memory into long-term memory through the hippocampus. And hippocampus is a part of the limbic system that's very important in memory, not only in storing memory, but also in recalling memory. Also, parts of the frontal lobe that are important, that are involved in complex cognitive, I would say, cognitive activities is also active, but not everything is active the whole time. As I shown you in REM, certain parts such as the limbic system, all that are active. Certain parts of the brainstem are active because they are important in maintaining REM sleep and actually getting you out of REM sleep. So it depends on what stage of sleep, and yeah, it depends basically on what stage of sleep.
Sure. And one more question, then we will end. Otherwise,
okay.
So, one more from Mr. Usman: sleep is more important, or muscle or nerve relaxation? What is more important for human beings?
Maybe I could be
connected, right? So sleep. The question is sleep more important, or muscle or nerve relaxation? So I would say, what is more?
Yeah. So I would be hesitant to say it's more important for one and not the other. I would say it's important for both. I don't know if it's equally or not equally, but I wouldn't really emphasize one, because during sleep, especially deep sleep stages, tissues try to regenerate. So restoration of tissue is an important, especially muscle tissue too, is an important part of deep sleep. And obviously, there's talk if neuronal cells can actually be created while we're in adulthood or not. Some people said obviously muscle tissue can regenerate, right? Muscle cells can regenerate, but nervous system cells, it's very debatable. So some people say yes, some people say no. The thing is that nerve cells can for sure be maintained for a longer period of time alive if we sleep better, because poor sleep equals to higher risk for dementia, and dementia happens because nerve cells die off, especially in parts of the brain connected to memory, storing memory, recall, and so on. So I that's my answer. I wouldn't really say that one is more important than the other. I would say sleep is important for your whole body. That's the thing.
Sure. Okay, Alen, I want to thank you. I want first to thank everybody to join us today. I have Alen here question about BioCrystal, but I would like to say this webinar is today more from a side of Mr. Alen from Harvard Medical School for sleep in general. For any request or to have for BioCrystal, you can contact us directly. Once more to thank Mr. Alen. Now today we have learned very from my point of view, very much new things, interesting things. From science side, also how is stress important, how is sleep important, and how it's important to have good mattress, good pillow, good and quality sleep. Again, Alen, thank you. If you have any question for me or to say anything for end.
I would just like to thank you for the invitation. It was great joining you, and hope people learned something new about sleep.
Yeah, I think we did a lot. Thank you again, and have a great day. We have night already here, so
thanks. It's still the day here.
Yeah, no, we just have night, but we have beautiful sunny days, I have to tell you.
Yeah, so, I can imagine.
It is cold, but it's beautiful. So thank you, everybody, and see you on another webinar. And Alen, have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.